Cool. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Max Talks podcast. It's George here. I'm joined with Max and James. And today we've got a very special guest in Rebecca Lowe. Now, Rebecca is wife of Paul Buckle, who came on a couple of weeks ago. She is also a renowned journalist in her own right, and she currently is the face of NBC's football shows over covering the Premier League. How are you doing, Rebecca?
I'm really good, George. Thank you for having me on. I like the way you get the fact that I'm Paul Buckle's wife in first.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's be honest. That's the most important thing. Get out there. Loving that.
we love Paul. We love Paul.
Paul was great.
I know. It's all good. So do I. It's okay.
So usually we start the show asking first footballing memory, but I kind of wanted to go different with you.
Yeah.
What was the first kind of thing that led you into journalism? I know your dad's quite a renowned journalist, obviously hosting the BBC News. What was the first thing that kind of got you down that track?
Very weird, George. Very, very weird because, as you say, my dad was a BBC News reader. My brother is now a journalist at the Times, and he was going to be a journalist since as long as I can remember. So everyone was, and my stepdad was a big journalist as well. He was a deputy Daily Express, and he ran the press association. So I was surrounded by journalism growing up, but never at any point did I think, oh, maybe that would be a good idea for me to go down that road. No. I was going to be an actress. That was the plan. So I went to university to do drama, was going to be an actress. And it's a bizarre story, but as I was coming towards graduation, I had made really good friends with a girl in the year below me at university. Now, she was 100 times the actress I was ever going to be, which linked into her, and the two of us were going to be a new French and Saunders, right? We were going to be the new thing, and we were going to be super famous. Everyone's going to love us. It was all going to be fine. But she was a year below me. So I said, listen, don't worry, Lucy. I will graduate, and then I'll just try and get us an agent that when you graduate next summer, we'll have an agent, like it was going to be that easy. We'll have an agent, and we'll then be able to launch ourselves on the national stage. So that was the plan. And within about a couple of weeks, but literally a couple of weeks before I graduated, she brought me a leaflet. And it was something she found when she was buying a CD at the Virgin Megastore. This is dating me so much. Yeah. But you guys don't even know what the Virgin Megastore is. No. It's like HMV. It's probably not even around anymore, HMV. Anyway, so she was paying for a CD. Again, no one does that anymore. And she picked up this leaflet, and it was called BBC Talent. And it was a competition. It was also on the back of cornflakes packets, I think, or Special K. And the BBC were running this nationwide hunt for talent in every area. So it wasn't just on screen. There was radio producers, or you could work in the weather department, wherever, all different ones. And she said, yes, they are searching for a cast for a new comedy series on the BBC. We did the audition. And I was like, yeah, obviously, because we're definitely going to get that. We'll definitely audition. Yeah,
it's never
the 21. You just think life's so easy. Yeah. So I started flicking through the pamphlet with her and all these different options. And she said, oh, look, they're searching for a football reporter. And I said, oh, yeah. And my whole life, I'm like the only one virtually out of all my friends that likes football. I actually wore a Crystal Palace shirt on my first day at university. And honestly,
brilliant.
Cracking.
Who is that in this group? I know, my old TDK Palace shirt. And so she said, you should apply for that. And I was like, well, I love football, but I've never been a reporter or anything like that. She said, oh, you might as well just do it. So then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, why not? Nothing to lose. And when I do something, chaps, I have to actually go all in. Otherwise, there's no point, right? That's the whole point. This was a 12-page application form for this football reporter job or prize, including photos that you'd taken that proved that you love football. You had to write a journalistic piece about football, loads of stuff that was a lot of effort and hard work. So I managed to get it done, sent it off, graduated, forgot all about it. Lucy and I go to the audition in some disused church in Brixton, searching for this new comedy cast. Let's just say we were not funny, and we did not get it.
You realised then it weren't for you.
Say again, Max?
I was saying, you realised then it weren't for you. You weren't going to make it with the comedy side.
At the point where we all sat in a circle, Max, and they went around saying, right, we're going to go around one by one, and we want you to be funny.
We probably need to. Oh yeah, I've prepared.
That is so hard. So then I knew, nope, not going to happen. So I then graduated and I was working at Talk Sport Radio. A friend of mine was working there and he got me into just for free, I didn't get paid, answering phones and doing all that kind of stuff, which actually I suppose looking back was a really good way in, but I was just doing it just to get some paid shifts while I was going to find this agent for Lucy and I. Then I'm promoted to assistant producer of The Breakfast Show after a few months, which was Harry and Alan Brazil back in those days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was. I can
imagine working with those two. It's interesting to say the least.
Yeah, I mean the amount of times we were like, "Is Alan coming in? Has anyone seen that?"
I bet it's even worse now with Ray Parlour being there as well.
Can you imagine? I know he's been fired 3 times and they brought him back 3 times, but I can't tell you the amount of times he was lying on the sofa outside the studio because he never went home. He just went to a casino. No joke. Big wad of cash, just lying there like that, saying, "Rebecca, can you get me a coffee?" I'm like, "Yeah, but you've just got to go in and read the headlines in about 10 seconds." To move. Honestly, it was quite for a 22-year-old, 21-year-old, I think. Yeah, 21-year-old. It was another world because there was 3 women in that office, and including me. The language. I mean, I was, I'm not that naive, but the language, I never heard anything like it in my life. And I was like, so the whole thing was an amazing experience and I was really enjoying it. And then I got this letter through the door saying, "You've got through to the next round of this football reporter, BBC Talent." I'm like, what? Oh yeah, that thing I applied for. Totally forgot about it. So I had to watch an England game and it was a World Cup qualifier or some sort of qualifier, European qualifier. And I had to ring a phone number and leave my 45-second match report down a phone line. I'd never written a match report in my life. And you only get one chance because it was a voicemail. So I did that, forgot about it, carried on working at Talk Sport. I was getting up at 2:30 every morning and getting a car into work and doing the breakfast show and just loving earning a bit of money. I was earning £80,000 a year and I was just like in the money and just running.
This is great.
I just loved it so much. And at the same time, I was really learning journalism because the producer of The Breakfast Show, an Australian guy back then, really took time to teach me a lot of things about how you write for radio, top lines, top stories, all that kind of thing, which I had no idea about. So I was learning a lot. Then I got another letter. Now you're through to the final of this BBC talent search. I'm thinking, okay, now it's got a little bit serious. Yeah. And I had to turn up, chaps, on a Saturday in October 2002 at Television Centre. And there were 7 finalists, 5 girls, 2 boys. So I'm thinking, well, they're obviously wanting a girl, so I think I've got a good chance here. And we had to watch Football Focus go out on air. Then we had to do a piece to camera about Football Focus and how we liked the show and what we liked about it. Then we had to interview Ray Stubbs. Weirdly, later on go and work with him. 10 years later, I would be like co-hosting with him, interview on air. And then a few other journalism exercises, and then that was it. And at 5 o'clock, I remember leaving the studios and I walked out and I hadn't really wanted it. I was so nervous and thinking I was never going to get it. I walked out of the studios and I don't know if you guys remember Television Centre all lights up at night when it's got the kind of the circles and it says
yeah.
It's just cool. And I looked up at that and it was a cold night and I thought, all right, I want it. I really want it. Oh God,
brilliant.
win this. So I remember going home and they said they were going to call us on the Tuesday morning, the following day. So I was heading to bed at 7 p.m. because I was working the breakfast show. I had to be up at 2 on the Monday night. And I was sitting on the sofa talking to my mum and I was saying, tomorrow's the day, we're going to find out. And as we're having this conversation, my phone rings and it said no number. And I'm thinking, okay. So I answered it and it was Lance Hardy, who is the assistant editor of Football Focus. And he said, I'm calling to let you know you've won.
Wow.
Chaps, let me tell you, it's one of those moments in your life, if you're ever lucky enough to have a moment where you could fall off your chair. I mean, you are in shock. Your entire world shifts on its axes in like 3 seconds. And it's a 6-month contract on Football Focus Match of the Day and Final Score as a reporter. And I'm thinking, first of all, I'm thinking, yes, 100%. Yeah, I'm taking it. And secondly, I'm thinking, Lucy, I promised Lucy that we're going to be French and Saunders, not just Saunders. So I called Lucy and told her, and she was amazing. And she was like, yeah, of course you have to take it. And of course it was 6 months. So that would kind of coincide with the following summer. And I thought, well, if I'm rubbish at it or I don't make it, then Lucy and I can still do our thing. But that was the rest is history. So I'm kind of now here where I am.
There you are.
That's absolutely mental.
A competition. It's mad.
What a journey.
And obviously you've gone on to work with some of the biggest names in sport, to name a few, Satana, ESPN, obviously the BBC being one. What was that first live game reporting like for you? Was there any nightmares?
Nightmares doesn't even come close. George, I did probably 3 days, no joke. It was Nottingham Forest against Reading, and they were in the first division, so it was a championship game at the City Ground. And I had been at the job 4 weeks, so I'd only just turned 22, and they sent me up on the train, and you remember final score? I think it's still on actually.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of on when there's a goal scored, and then you do a halftime report, full-time report. And I didn't really know what the hell I was doing. It was the most sink or swim moment ever, and I just about swam, but half drowned. I'll be honest. It was terrible. My dad tells me now that he paced up and down his living room for hours beforehand, just trying to control his breathing. He was so nervous for me because he was
Bless him.
I know, God bless him. But I'd never done anything like this. I mean, I'd done acting, but this was a different world. So it was terrifying. And I have to say, final score, which I did for 5 years, was, I don't know if it was because it was the first thing I did, therefore I always felt like it was terrifying, or if it was genuinely as terrifying. Everybody does it. But it's really, you wouldn't think it when you're watching it, but I think it's incredibly difficult. You have to hit times. You're only there when something's happened. And you have to make sure you get everything right on BBC One. So the whole thing was terrifying. I hated every single second of it. It was one of the many times in my early career I wished I was doing anything in the world. I mean, I used to at people selling hot dogs and I'd be like, why did I do that? Why am I not doing that? You know, I just hated it. I really did not like it at all.
Wow.
The problem is you're not like a renowned name like Chris Kamara, who's been in the game and everyone knows him as a jokester. And so when he messes up not knowing that someone's been sent off at Portsmouth, it's like, oh, what is she doing?
but that's the life of being a woman anyway. Sorry to be so about it, but
No, you're right.
No,
you know, you're right. Kamara makes a mistake. It's Chris Kamara. A regular male reporter, wasn't a former player, makes a mistake. Oh, we just made a mistake. I make a mistake. What she does football?
Leading
it's hard.
on from that, this wasn't one of the questions that I had prepared. I think Alex Scott gets quite a bad rep from BBC One fans and also Sky fans. How do you think? Have you seen anything of what she's done? How do you think she's handling everything?
Yeah, I know Alex quite well actually, because I was one of the early reporters on the England women's team. Yeah, sorry. Over here it's the US women's national team. It's so complicated. Over in England, women's team, and right at the time that Alex Scott, Kelly Smith, Karen Carney, all those big stars were playing. So I interviewed Alex many times. At the time, and now I look back on it, didn't think that this would be in her future because she was pretty shy, but then they all were, and they weren't really used to doing the media. But I saw her, or we messaged quite a lot on Instagram, and I saw her first stuff that she was doing a couple of years ago on Sky, and we were in the next door studios to each other because NBC had come over. We usually open the season in England. NBC, we all fly over. And I was next door to her, but our advert breaks were totally the other way around, so I could never go in and see her. So we were just texting. I think she's brilliant. I think it makes me mad at the abuse that she gets. I think there's absolutely no question that the woman played for England. So
she's won countless trophies with Arsenal. You know, she's
absolutely
she knows what she's talking about. I think
she can't not.
I think she's brilliant, and I'm glad that the BBC gave her a chance. And the people who were slating her can, in my opinion,
do one.
Yeah. Because
do one. But also, you know why they're slating them? Because anyone who slates anybody for reasons that they're slating Alex is because there's either jealousy involved, insecurity, or challenging what they think is the norm, which means they're just close-minded. So I don't even worry about those people. She's brilliant.
She is.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
How did you find working at Satanta Sport?
Well, it was a big risk to go there. Because it went fast.
Because I remember when it first came out, and I remember watching it, and I just used to think like, I just always remember like the cameras cutting out, and it was just always felt like a absolute tragedy every time that it came on. It was awful at times.
Tragedy! I love it!
I just want to watch Arsenal, and this is happening.
I know. All right, so that's
now,
what.
I'd probably be happy because Arsenal.
But Max, it's okay because I wasn't really involved in that much of the Premier League, so I was only involved in the conference. So when it was funny because I was working at the BBC then for 5 years, freelancing, little contracts, different stuff, and I was presenting the sports news on BBC News 24 as it was then known. I think it's called the News Channel now. I had a friend of mine at Football Focus say to me on the sly, would you be interested in going to Setanta? The guy who I used to work with is going to head it up. His name's Stephen Cook, and he wants you to work for him. I was thinking, I've got a BBC pension, which is, by the way, the friggin' lottery. So I'm thinking, not sure about that. But I was so bored, and I was reading the auto. I hate reading auto cue, and it was 10 bulletins a day reading the same sports news, just boring. And I thought, this is a big risk. So I went to meet Stephen Cook, and he said, this is my plan. And by the way, this guy is, in my opinion, the most talented producer in English football television. It's him that we see so much of the way we see stuff today in the television world of football. And he said, this is my plan. We're going to do the conference, but I know everyone's like, oh, conference, no one cares. And we don't care. We're going to do dressing room interviews, pitch side, you're going to be everywhere. And I'm like, interesting. And I know there's going to be a small audience, but what it's going to allow me to do is be myself, grow into whatever broadcast be, challenging, interesting, and be able to make mistakes because I know there's not going to be millions of people watching. Yeah. So after meetings, I decided to hand my notice in at the BBC, which was interesting as well because a few months before, and I'm sure the don't mind me saying this, you know Dan Walker, who does BBC Breakfast, and you know Sean Fletcher, who does the sport on Good Morning Britain, and he does country.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So me and those two were all together at the news channel, and there was 2 staff jobs, which was a big deal, and 3 of us going for it. And this was 3 months before I left, and they both got it, and I didn't get it. And I was taken into a room by the boss, and I was told, I'm afraid we to Dan and Sean. And I said, okay. And this isn't really very me, but I remember saying to him, I don't know why, I said, just so you know, you've made a big mistake. I mean, that's just like, that's confident, isn't it? So confident, James, like, where did that come from? So it just came out, because I think I just really genuinely felt like that they'd made a mistake. Less about, just more about, I should be getting a job here. So I said, and I'm gonna prove to you, I said. And this guy, James, said to me, oh, okay, he was totally taken aback. Yeah, okay, go on and prove to me. So 3 months later, I went to his office again and I said, just so you know, I'm leaving. Thanks for not giving me a job. I'm going to leave. So I went to definitely stepped down in profile, but my goodness, it's the best thing I ever did. And those 2 years before they went bust, doing the Bloom Year, as it was then known, the conference, but also a show that might have seen with James Richardson on a Monday night called Football Matters, which was a bizarre, very long, irreverent, crazy show. A Premier League.
James Richardson. I absolutely.
Anything with. He's brilliant, but my goodness, working with James, I've never met anyone in my life. He's a genius. He's very funny, and it was an amazing experience. So those 2 years were the best in terms of the most enjoyable 2 years of my career. Brilliant people. We were all together on this tiny little ship called Setanta that no one ever heard of.
Well, it came out of nowhere, didn't it, as well?
Yeah.
And then it disappeared again. Like, where the hell did that go? And they still owe me money, which is unbelievable.
I kind of think it's like the Radio Rock of football shows.
Yes.
It just very much, we're on the move and we've crashed.
Yes. So true. But without that, there's no way I'd be where I am today. No way.
Oh, that risk you took was
the
best risk you've taken.
Without a doubt. And sometimes I think it's really important you have to move up all the time in your career. Sometimes you have to have the longer view. And I knew that if it was going to be good in the end, that would be great. And even if it wasn't, at least I would learn stuff and be challenged. And I just thought at the end of the day, I could stay at the BBC for the rest of my career, which would be very safe and it will be fine. And I probably would still be there now. And I'd be reading the sports news. But I just realized I wasn't that person. I thought I was. For years, I thought I just liked a very normal I just thought, no, I'm not. I want to be challenged. I'm bored. I don't like being bored. I have to do the next thing. So that was the moment, and it changed my life. And my dad, my poor dad, who'd been 37 and a half years at the BBC, he said to me, well, leaving the BBC. I said, and you're going to where? I'm like, where? So, yeah.
They're a small startup with a lot of promise.
Exactly. So yeah, bless him, he was worried. But yeah, best thing I ever did.
How was it doing the conference? Because obviously, you know, you get to your Premier League, your Championship, League One and League Two, and you've got an idea of what you're going on about. But as soon as you go into the conference, you've got all these players that you may not have known before, teams that are coming up from, you know, the Northern, Southern, and what was it like learning about that?
It's one of those things, James, where when it's all you're doing, I enveloped myself. So I read the non-league paper every week, cover to cover, every single bit of it. I wasn't worried. To be honest, I hardly watched the Premier League in those 2 years. I just was totally obsessed with the conference. So when you've only got, I think there was 24 teams, and I'm pretty good at sort of soaking in information. So as soon as you start doing it, and we were doing 2 games a week, you very quickly get to know the stories. And then it becomes a bit like when I was doing the England women's team. If that's all you do, it becomes very much your baby. And I didn't understand anybody who wasn't watching it, because I knew how brilliant it was, how the characters were fabulous, and I just loved it so much. It became really easy. And also the clubs were just like, come in, because of course it was the first national television contract they'd ever had. So we were saying, can we put cameras in the dressing rooms? They were like, most of them like, yeah, you can. The only ones that would say no were the ones who'd come down from the Football League or had the managers
a bit more professional.
Derby. Yes. Jim Smith at Derby, at Oxford, God rest his soul. He was having none of us. I mean, Jim Smith a million times. He didn't want all the like Chris Wilder. Yeah, exactly. Chris Wilder, who was at Halifax at the time, would you believe? He was coming up. He was starting so he understood the importance of media and TV. So they really let us in. And so there was never something that I've experienced with everything else in my career, which is this wall that goes up. You know, when I was at ESPN, I was doing all the Premier League players and managers. It's so difficult. It's just a wall straight away, and you can't get near them. And if you do get near them, you can't ask this. The Blue Square Premier, known then, the conference was just like, come in. It was just it was so loving. It was a big loving. I absolute every single second of that whole show.
And in comparison, it's like us. When we get guests on like Chris Todd and Paul, it's nice for us because we can ask so much more about their career. And we've just had David Wheeler on, and you know, he was great to talk to, but you could always tell like he was almost holding something back because he is a professional footballer and he needs to keep that stature up there. He is he's playing for Wickham and he's going to the Championship. He needs to be a level head, because if he goes out and he says something rash, then that could be his career. Like, it might be a small podcast, but that's it.
But yeah, but it's just, they're nothing small anymore. When you retweet and you can repost and you can get, you know, nothing is small anymore. You could say something like you said publicly on a podcast, and it could end up everywhere. But that's the downside of it, is because it doesn't need to be that way. That's what's so frustrating. I feel like so many of these players are so terrified of talking, and they need to be media trained in a completely different way to the way they're media trained. They're media trained to think that you three and me are the enemy. That's not the case. The media, the very essence of the word media, is just a middleman. It's just a middleman between the fans and the players. And I just don't understand why they've been trained. And I know part of the reason why is that sometimes things get written and headlines get written which are out of context, and that is the problem, and that's why they close up shop. But I just wish they would allow us a bit more of their personality, these players, because we're not trying to catch them out. We're just trying to.
I've seen that Hector Bellerin has started up a podcast, and he's been bringing on football players, and I think that's great, because it's you know, it's just football players sitting down having a chat, and you rarely see that. As you say, it does feel like there is a guard put up. And as I said, it's just great to see, especially Hector Bellerin, because you know what he's like. He is very much someone who does like to engage with fans. He's he's Spanish, but he's got some weird accent now. I don't know if you've heard his accent.
Yeah, I know. He is definitely an interesting character. He is, and I think he's got a great idea.
So, who are, since being at like Setanta, ESPN, and NBC. Who would you say are like the best pundits you've worked with?
Well, I have to start with NBC because
Yeah.
absolutely. They'll hammer me if I don't mention Carl Martino, who used to play with Beckham at Galaxy and on the US men's national team. And he is excellent on television. And I think it's hard for him to be the only American on our show.
Mm-hmm.
He's just in a minority. Robbie Earle, Robbie Mustoe, two of the pros you'll ever meet. I mean, Robbie Earle, I don't think I've ever met anyone like Robbie Earle in my life. Couldn't be more laid back.
Yeah.
Right, when you're not on the air and you go off for your week off or you go off for the summer, he goes off the grid. Like no one knows where Robbie Earle goes. He knows
Is he coming
back? We call it like going off the grid because you can't find him. Like, and no one knows where he is. And yet, will know everybody that you know. He'll already know everyone that you know. He'll know every person in every country. Like one person in every country. Wherever he goes, like, oh yeah, well, I've got a contact. How have you ever? He knows everybody. In the world, and the most laid back person in the world, and the hardest worker. Love him. And Robbie Mustoe is just hilariously funny without knowing it at all, and also just takes it all very, very seriously. And they are, all three of them are very talented at the American way of television, which is very different to England, where you have only got 30-second soundbites to get your point across. So no words can be wasted. You have to be succinct. So they're brilliant at that. If I look before NBC, I worked with so many. Steve McManaman was always one of my favorites. It's hard for me because I encountered not a lot, but some who I think found it hard to work with a woman. So I did it. So every time I found somebody who didn't feel that way, I just loved them straight away, no matter what they were like. So on TV. So Steve McManaman, greatest, absolute greatest. Loved him to pieces. John Barnes, just so easy to work with. Just the greatest of all. I mean, John Barnes. He's John Barnes.
Yeah, it's John Barnes. Like, how can you not like
Look,
John Barnes?
I'm an Everton fan. I find it hard to like John Barnes. Okay, I am struggling at the moment.
He's an absolute first class legend. I can't tell you how much I love John Barnes. So those two were brilliant. ESPN. We tended to do a lot of rotation, so there'd be different people on all the time. I'm trying to think who else we had.
Have you worked with Dixon?
Oh, yeah, well, Lee Dixon. Dicko's who I work with now, and Graham Lasso, of course. They're in the UK because they're the co-commentators for the show. But they've come over and they've done the show with me a few times when we've done a big talent swap. They are, I mean, those two men, Lee and Graham, are like salt of the earth. Like, you would never know they were Premier League footballers, let alone like title winners. They're the most humble, modest people you've ever liked to meet. What you see is what you get. Lee Dixon has done some things for me as a favour to friends of mine who've been going through hard times, but not does he just do one thing I ask. He goes over and above what I ask him. Honestly, they are fabulous and very, very good at what they do as well. So yeah, they're also up there. But a lot of people who come in are really, really good. I mean, there's so many more. On Football Matters, we had different people every week. So there isn't anyone terrible. You do get the odd. I do remember doing a Luton game, actually. Paul was managing the game against Millwall in the FA Cup 5th round. It was that big game in 2013. And I had McManaman and I had one other person. I can't tell you who it was because it'd be mean. But it was almost impossible to get a word out of him. And I've never had to broadcast a game where there are two people in the studio. The other one is just carrying this guy. He couldn't hardly string a sentence together. He had nothing to say. It was all
his first time or something on the
yeah, he wasn't a regular. He definitely wasn't. He was a former player, and I think he was nervous. It was really tough. So when you find a pundit who is eloquent and easy and can deal with pressure and can deal with getting a count in their ear so that they don't mess you up because you have to throw to break and they have to stop talking so that you can throw to break. When you get something like that, it makes your job so much easier.
Yeah.
That's lovely. I mean, obviously you've been in the game quite a while now, which is so hard. And your move to America, something for us that we're sort of developing. The women's game over here has really developed over the last 5-10 years. Yeah. In America, it seemed like it was already there. How do you find the American game out there?
James, it is and it isn't. So the US women's national team, as they call it, is obviously massive. Olympics all the time, winning World Cups all the time. That's at a level totally separate to the women's league.
Okay.
The women's league is the NWSL is had a really tough time, and I don't really quite understand. It's a bit of a mystery why 100,000 people will turn up to watch Team USA in a women's game, and then 100 people or 1,000 people will turn up to watch the Houston Dash or whoever it is playing the next week. Yeah. Whereas, you know, all the stars, Alex Morgan, all these stars are playing. I don't really know why that is. I think that might be to do with the fact that club soccer generally is taking its time. I mean, it's changing now, but has taken its time to lift off, because week to week to week, people are doing baseball, NBA, NFL, NHL. Yeah, they haven't managed to get soccer as part of that little rotation. So the weekly games in the NWSL and MLS is just taking longer to get through. But the women's game, in terms of on a national scale, it is, I would say the women's team's bigger than the men's team actually over here. And that's partly obviously because they're more successful. I mean, the men's team didn't even qualify for the last World Cup, which was amazing to just hammer every American about that, because they like to give it back about how, you know, they won every war for us and all that.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much.
They like to have a lot of banter in the USA rubbish. Yeah. So it's amazing to see the WSL in England be where it is now, because like I say, I was a reporter for the BBC, and then for Setanta and ESPN, I did a lot of the England women's games and the women's league games. And it was such a trial and such an effort to try and get people interested. Also, sometimes to try to get people to work on the show, you know, want to women's football. And that was only 10 years ago. It was really, really hard. And when I went to the Women's World Cup in 2011 with ESPN over here, not in England, so American ESPN, I couldn't believe the money that ESPN were putting into a Women's World Cup. It's astounding to me. And that made me realize, okay, this is different. Women's soccer on a national, international level in the USA, they are mega stars. I mean, if you look, and I know it doesn't always translate, but if you look at the followers of the likes of Alex Morgan, you know, maybe not Pulisic, but the likes of most of the men's team, miles ahead. I mean, Pulisic's hello, what a player Christian Pulisic is, by the way.
Yeah,
he's
fantastic.
So far.
He is so good.
Such a good player, and he's 21, and he comes from like this little Hershey, Pennsylvania, which is famous for chocolate, in this little town and in this state.
I'm just going to put it out there. Best American player ever, Tim Howard. Let's just say it now. We don't have to say it. You know,
Manchester United's Tim Howard? Oh, Everton.
Oh, no, Everton. Sorry. The same Tim Howard made, like, was it 15 saves in a game, and it was the most in a World Cup?
He is amazing.
I think it was that Tim Howard.
He is amazing. He is amazing.
All you guys talk about Everton. It's all.
I love it. But also, like, how are you an Everton fan when you sound like a complete Londoner?
My mum's from Liverpool. My mum's from Liverpool,
Okay,
and my dad was a glory hunter at the time of Andy Gray.
That went wrong.
That
went wrong after the 80s.
Like
See,
so,
you're saying that to George, but James here is also a Liverpool fan. I'm actually the only real fan.
No, but he's only a Liverpool fan because he likes Michael Owen.
Michael Owen was my hero growing up. So I think
1998.
Don't you think so, Rebecca?
Yeah,
Well, hang on, James. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Hertfordshire.
I'm struggling with the Liverpool.
See,
Max, where are you from?
I was born in Edmonton and then moved to Hartford, but I'm an Arsenal fan.
Fair enough. Totally fine. You're the only one.
It doesn't say that on his birth certificate, Rebecca. I must ask you, Rebecca. A very, very big personality in the women's national game is obviously Megan Rapinoe. What do you think about everything that she's been doing, the stuff she's been trying to promote, and the way she's gone about it?
I mean, I love it. She's I was lucky enough to meet her in that 2011 Women's World Cup, but she wasn't the person or even the player she was then that she is now. 9 years ago, she was on the bench, really, for Team USA, which is hard to think about it when you... I mean, she really was. When I look back now, she was very periphery. In fact, we were on the set in Germany, and ESPN said to us, you've got Abby Wambach coming, Alex Morgan, and Megan Rapinoe. They call her Rapinoe over here. And I was like, okay, great. Thinking, I better look up what Rapinoe's done in her career. She wasn't really
Yeah.
really that big a star then, because there were much bigger stars. And my goodness, she is like, she's a bit of a Marcus Rashford, isn't she, in that vein? But obviously, in that she's managed to get to a situation talent-wise which helps the fact that off the field, whatever she says has gravitas. So Marcus Rashford could only really do the change that Marcus Rashford does because he's Marcus Rashford. We know that. Because actually, because he was having an amazing season, what he did off the field, that was accentuated because he was such a star. If he'd had a terrible season, it sounds awful and it shouldn't be this way, but it would have been harder for him off the field to have done all those things he did in off.
It's true. Yes,
you know what I mean? Yeah, and Rapinoe now is such a star, such an amazing player, that everything she does off the field is 10 times bigger. And I love the Trailblazer.
Role model, isn't she?
Everything that she supports, everything that she fights for, she never gives up. She always has a cause. And without people like her and Marcus Rashford, the people they're trying to help and the people they're trying to support and fight for have nobody fighting for them and have no voice. So without her, I mean, can you imagine the change that she's made? Just one voice because of her platform. Thank God people who have a platform on the whole want to use it for good. So I am a massive Megan Rapinoe fan.
It goes back to your point earlier, Rebecca, when you were saying about obviously women in football getting hammered on social media. You look at Marcus Rashford and what he's done, everyone's supporting him. As soon as Megan Rapinoe comes out with something and says, this is how I feel, she just gets hammered on social media.
Because James, because we think we're in 2020 and we're all really forward thinking. We're not. A woman is still tough for a lot of people to take, and I find that in all walks of my life. I think I'm very strong-minded, I'm very strong, and I think that I'm often perceived as being bossy or, too much. And that's how women, unfortunately, in 2020, who are strong-minded and successful and want to make change, are often, not always, but often believed to be. It turns people off because those people, going back to what we said before about closed-mindedness, because those people who are turned off by that have issues themselves. I really believe this, that they are being challenged, they are being threatened, and that's very much those people's problems. And you're right, and we are so far away, James, from that not being a problem. From when Megan Rapinoe does something and isn't hammered for it, we are another generation away from that. We are so far away.
So I obviously I bring him up again, but I obviously subscribe to Everton on YouTube, all the videos that they do, and they did one on Everton women, and the coach there basically had a surprise visit from Carlo Ancelotti when he signed, because he wanted to know every part of the club. And there's a snippet of Ancelotti saying, they're the future of football. He went, the men are just, they're out there, everyone knows what they're about, but the women are the future. He went, tell me about your tactics. Tell me about all the women here. He wanted to get to know every single woman there, and he actually coached a few sessions for them, working on tactics. How important do you think it is that there's a crossover of both men and women, like coaches and staff and management?
Very, very good question.
Massive, George. Because go on.
It's only recently over in England that we've had women going full time, being paid the same. Obviously less, which is unfair, than the men, but I know that Everton were the first club to go full-time with all their women, paying them at least £50,000 a year. How important do you think is that crossover is?
It's crucial. I mean, first of all, when I said what I said in my previous answer about the closed-minded people, and often it's a generational thing, you get people like Carlo Ancelotti, who is 64, I think, and is not one of those people, despite of his age and his generation. So there is hope, and there are plenty of people like Carlo Ancelotti out there, thank God. I mean, Manchester United, when I was doing women's football, Manchester United, we used to ask all the time, couldn't have been less interested in creating a women's team. They've only had a women's team for the last years. And I remember when I first interviewed Kelly Smith, as you remember, the golden girl of the England team, back in 2003. And I went to London Colney, to Arsenal's training ground, to interview her for Football Focus. And she, I think, was there, not because she was there training, but because she was working at the club, like as an employee of like academy kids, or it was like, hang on a second, you're an Arsenal star, you're a mega star, but you're doing like a proper PAYE job for Arsenal Football Club, admin and academy. And this is thinking, this is not really on. We are 100 years away from Kelly Smith being Kelly Smith on 50 grand a year. I mean, 50 grand a year. I mean, that's a brilliant wage, but it's a joke, isn't it? I mean, when you
Yeah.
think,
Oh yeah.
I mean, but at least we started. At least we started. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd say no chance. And so the crossover. So I mean, Arsenal have been doing it for years in terms of the importance of the women having a team. But the crossover within these clubs is so crucial, because what we have seen, chaps, the reason why women's football gets the audiences it now does in England, both at ground, much better, and on television, which is pretty big, especially when England play, but even the WSL, it's attractive and people want to watch these games. And I think that's been proven now over the last 10 years. The reason why this has happened is the tireless fighting by the broadcasting companies, the FA, the clubs, and the players to push it to the front. So it's a lesson to us all that whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether it's sexism, homophobia, you feel like you're fighting this fight and it's never going to make a change. It is. And I think women's football in England is actually proof that if you constantly fight and you spend the money on marketing and you promote, yes, you've got to have a bit of success in there as well, which helps. You will get to a point where you are actually penetrating the consciousness of the country. And that is what has happened. But it takes time. And I would say I started in 2002. Where are we now? 18 years later, which is almost, I would say, a generation. That has taken a generation to get to the point where I've now been talking to you about women's football for like 10, 15 minutes. Nobody wanted to talk to me about women's football.
Not at all.
I think it was one of the first points that we brought up as a three to talk to you about. And obviously we're not saying that just because you're a woman and you're in the game of football. It was genuinely because we thought it'd be nice to get an insight of what you've gone through in those 18 years. It's almost gone through a mega change now, and it seems like
unrecognisable.
All of these teams. I get excited. I text Max when I think a couple of years ago, Everton were facing Arsenal in the FA Cup final, and I went, Everton versus Arsenal in the FA Cup, because it's the only silverware we're going to win. We still lost 4-0, but it's fine.
Yeah. Arsenal don't lose FA Cups, George.
No, they don't. Whether it's men's or women's, they don't lose FA Cups. But you're right. But you know what? We have to look at it, chaps. And I'm fed up with hearing, but they're not as good, they're not as fast, they don't tackle as much, they're goalkeepers. It's a different sport. It's the same sport. It's just a different sport. So
it needs to be normalised rather than like
totally. And actually, I think it was Emma. Oh, what's her name? The Chelsea manager. Emma. I forget her name. She's brilliant, and I think she was talking about making the goals smaller. It was about 6 months ago, I think.
Yeah, I remember that.
I can't remember what her name is. Anyway, and she and I think, you know what? I know that sounds a bit like initially it would be unpopular, but I'm not necessarily for it or against it, but I'm interested in it because the criticisms of women's football is the goalkeepers are too small, they can score goals too easily, and all the other things that they're not, it should be 90 minutes and all that. It's not the same game. It can't be. Women and men are biologically totally different in virtually every possible way. So we got to look at it as, yes, you've got the Evertons and the Arsenals and we've got all the same names, but we are football alongside men's football in a different way. It's a different game. Don't expect it to look like men's football. It's not going to be. But my God, women's football's got a load of stuff that men's football hasn't. So like not diving and rolling around and play out.
100%.
And it's quick and it's got loads of things. So I think they have to slightly be careful that we don't spend our life comparing, which I think is a natural thing for humans. So they've got to market it a bit more cleverly, I think.
But that's the thing. A very good friend of mine started a grassroots club in Hertfordshire, a women's grassroots club 2 years ago. And he was probably one of the first in the area to do it. Now, since he's done it, they're called Meninas Football Club. He has had over 150 girls walk into the door and play football from the start. And from that, there has been 1, 2, 3, 4, countless numbers of other teams in the area now. So
wow, there's people like your friend. Like James, people like your friend. That's what changes our world. I mean, people like getting up one morning. I'm going to start a women's football club, grassroots. Look what it's done. Look at the effect he's had. I mean, it's people like him who should be getting the funding, by the way, from the to help grow those. I mean, that is proper change and doing proper things for the community and our I mean, that is just brilliant. But when I was growing up and I was at school and teenager and stuff, and people ask me all the time in interviews now, they say, did you play the game? I'm like, what, in England? No.
Not a chance, no.
Well, a girl in the back garden with my brother, because I had to be in goal every day. But like, no, I never played the game. I only ever played it when I went to America for 1 year at high school, and I played it a little bit then, because it was normal for women to play football. But I'd never played a game of football until I moved to America age 18. And that's ridiculous.
I remember when I was little, I used to, like when I was at school, the boys and the girls used to play football together. And then all of a sudden there was that, do you remember that rule that came in?
When
Yeah.
Split. And I just always remember, that was it. Girls just stopped.
Yeah.
They stopped playing.
Of course. And there was nobody like James's friend to say, hang on a second, they were all loving it. Let's start a team, you know. And
this is the front. My sister used to play with me, and well, I played a year up. But I was talking to a few of my friends down the pub, and I said, "What's the best centre backs you've ever played with?" And like, we're at a good level. And one of them turned around and went, "Your sister and my brother." And I went, "What do you mean, my sister?" He went, "Your sister was hard as nails, and she could go into any challenge. She wasn't scared." And then he went, "When she left at 13, we went downhill." And she went to the women's game at that point, and it wasn't like it is now, where girls would go into the challenge like you know, they weren't scared to get hurt, basically. And she just found it totally different. It put her off of football totally, because she had a lot of talent, and you played with my sister. And
I mean,
that totally off of it.
You've just totally illustrated there, George, why they're totally different games. Because I remember doing the England women's reporting in Spain back in about 2003, and remember that place in Spain where the England men's team La Manga. They always used to go to La Manga and train, the England team. And the women's team went to train at the same time, would you believe, as Farnborough, who were in the Conference South, I think, went for some warm weather training. I think they'd won the league or something, don't ask me. And they were all at La Manga, and they decided to have a game, right? Farnborough, Conference South, against the England women's team. Farnborough 8-0. But not because, like, they're technically better.
No, yeah.
Stronger, bigger, faster. So your sister was pushed out of the game because of all those reasons why it's nothing. That wasn't her game. She shouldn't have been playing against men. Up until a certain age, no problem. But once you get older, it's a different game. It's just like, oh.
The problem is she was one of the best players on the pitch.
Yeah.
Well, she must have been really good then.
She was. No. My sister, 100%. At a point, my sister was 100% better than me at football.
I love that. At a point. Just at one point.
No,
Still now.
George was a good goalie.
I'm only, yeah. But I mean, so obviously moving away, you're a Crystal Palace fan. How have you found the season? How have you found everything that's going on in the club?
I think I said everything.
Zaha is looking likely to move away. What are your hopes for next season?
Who's he going to go to?
It's Everton. Everyone always goes to Everton who make top six.
Yeah, Balassi.
George, I wouldn't get too excited. Oh, Balassi. Oh, I know. I have a fantasy season. Well, just before I came on with you, I was listening to a Roy Hodgson interview on the radio, and he was sounding very sprightly and happy and very philosophical about how it's just been a really tough restart. You know, we just haven't been ready for it. We just, a small squad, aging squad. I think we've just lost 7 games in a row, and we're probably going to lose against Tottenham on Sunday. So we're going to finish the season with probably 8 straight defeats. I love Roy, but questions have to be asked about Hodgson.
It's the season. This season coming. Is this going to be the same stuff? You're not.
And I don't want. Well, and I think it could be worse, Max. That's the problem. I don't think it's going to be the same. I think if we stay with Roy and the conservative, defensive, what are the other team doing? Not what shall we do? And that's his plan. If we stick with that and we don't invest heavily, we've got problems. I don't think we are going to invest heavily because we've got no money. Because no clubs, not many clubs have got much money now, and there's no foreseeable idea of when we're going to get any money through the gate. So we haven't, other than Zaha, we haven't really got anyone to sell. So selling Zaha, which we will have to do, and I think the time is right. I mean, to be honest, the time was right last summer, but he's had a bad season. So and we're never going to make the money we were going to make on him last summer.
Well, you've got this new stadium coming as well, haven't you?
No, it's a new stand.
Oh, it's a new stand.
New stand.
Yeah, we're not as cool as a whole new stadium.
I gotta
thought
say,
it was just the animation.
Looks
I know, it looks amazing.
Yeah, they did,
I
yeah.
know. Yeah, it's the perception that no, it's a new stand, so we've got that to spend.
Still, that's still money, and you have to.
Yeah, exactly. Still money you've got to spend, and we just had a new academy done, so that was money. I mean, Steve Parish. I couldn't be a bigger fan of Steve Parish. He's a brilliant chairman, and I thank him all the time for everything he's done for our club, and I never want him to leave ever. He's brilliant in every way, and he's getting all the foundations right with the academy and the stadium and all that. The problem is that the owners, who are not totally Steve, I'm not sure they're as committed as I would like them to be. The American owners, other issues, and that concerns me. So I think we have to sell to buy. Zaha is really the only player we can probably sell for any money and want to sell. We're not going to get more than, I mean, if we got 40 million, I'd be amazed now. So
I agree.
no chance. He's 28. He's the lights.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at now.
Maybe 30, which would be amazing considering we were talking like 80s not long ago.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned that the whole squad is aging. I think the manager might have run his course, but I don't want to fire him because he's Roy Hodgson. He's like a big old teddy bear. We just need.
You can't be horrible to
You
Roy.
can't be.
You can't. Boy, poor old boy. You can't. So I'd like him to retire if possible over a nice dinner with Steve Parish where they both come. My dad and I were talking about this the other day. Let's imagine Steve and Roy go out for dinner, have a nice glass of wine, lovely meal, and they just say, you know what? Is it time? I think it's time. And then and you know what I mean? And then we need a young manager, maybe a bit of a risk, but not a Frank de Boer risk.
No.
Maybe a Eddie Howe.
A Frank Lampard risk.
A Steven Gerrard risk.
Steven Gerrard. Tell you what, Steven Gerrard would do wonders at Palace, I think.
I think Steven Gerrard to Palace for a few years before he gets Klopp's job. I mean, I think it's perfect.
I agree.
So
I think it'd be perfect for him.
I don't mind being a stepping stone. I'm all right to be.
I think
For Steven Gerrard, I'll be a stepping stone.
He would also bring in players though because of his name.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
You've
and
got to work
apparently he's really good with the kids and the youth and the development. So I've made a few noises about Steven Gerrard to certain people who, are in certain positions and said, I think we should think about Steven Gerrard. So I don't know. I can also see Steve Parish staying with Roy until Roy's, 90. So, because he's just loyal. So it's going to be a tough next 12 months. I mean, how the hell Palace is still a Premier League team? When I was growing up, it was promoted and then relegated immediately every single year. When I moved to America, I went to the playoff final at Wembley, and then I was like, this is perfect. I'm moving to America. Palace are going to be in the Premier League at least for one season, but obviously they'll go straight back down to it, but at least I'll get one season. I'm still here 7 years later. It's ridiculous.
Stay out in America.
I know. It's mad.
That's great, though. And I must ask one question. How's it living with Paul?
Well,
between us lot, after the recording was done, he did tell us that he turned around and he just went, "Yeah, they want me on, they don't want you." Yeah.
What we found funny as well was that it seemed like he was in a supermarket or a cafe.
Yeah, well, Max, you have to understand that.
Going past with a trolley.
What you have to understand about my husband is that because he works on the phone 24/7, he doesn't do that at home. I think he likes to separate home from work.
Yeah.
And every single day of his life, he's in a coffee shop, and he goes through stages of he'll always go to the same one for a few months, and then he's like a cat. He moves position every few months. But the problem with COVID is that COVID shut them all down. So he ages, and then they started to open and then shut again, and then he's got another. So he found one that he could sit indoors in a supermarket, pushed out to the corner. And honestly, I was there when he was doing the interview with you. I was laughing. I was thinking, what must they be thinking? You can hear the ding ding. It's so funny. But yeah, living with him, he's the best. He's the best. I learned something new about him every single day. He is the most passionate person about everything he does. He's now a consultant, as you guys know, advising, which he's kind of become. He's blossomed into this. I mean, his manager was not always easy, and
Testing.
It's funny because I look at people like Frank Lampard's wife, Christine, and I look at the wives who are in the public eye of managers that I know, and I think I know what you're going to go through when he comes home tonight. On Sunday, if Chelsea don't make top 4, I'm assuming that Christine will be going out Sunday night because you don't want to be home when
Very
Frank comes
heavy.
home.
Well, I mean,
It's
we
really
heard
hard.
a bit of Lampard the other night to Klopp.
Yes.
That was
Oh,
fantastic.
yeah, right? Wasn't that brilliant? I love that. And
That's
today
just like the start. If they don't
he said, my language wasn't great, but they still, and he was kind of half apologising, like still.
The thing is,
But that's
but the thing is, you want your manager to show that passion.
you do.
I would, for a fan.
You do.
Yeah.
Oh, fans love that.
But
Absolutely
if
love
you're
that.
like another
You're
half,
passive, yeah.
you probably
I know.
think Frank
No.
fine it down.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to
But
stand there at
but
6'5", like.
Exactly. But the ones who show that passion are also always going to be the ones that take it home with them.
Yeah.
And hard to be mad. I would say I think there's maybe a podcast out there for managers' wives, because it's really, really a difficult balance to get because of all the emotions caught up in football. And I've finally cracked how to handle him after a defeat. And actually also after a victory, because in the beginning I used to think every time he won, he'd be like jumping in the air. And so I'd be jumping in the air, but he wasn't, because football managers aren't really, unless they've won a trophy. They're on to the next straight away. So I would be there like, let's have a bottle of wine. And he'd be like, no, I can't. I'm actually annoyed.
Do you think Paul becoming the advisor has like
Mellowed him
a little bit?
Totally mellowed him out. He still gets frustrated at things within the game, within his job, but that's because he's so passionate about everything he does and he fervently believes in what he believes in. Like there's like a thing with Paul where there's like certain things in life and in football that he is fervently passionate are the right way to behave, and he will stick to that as a person himself, and he expects others. And I've often said to him, like, you expect people to get up to your standards and they're just not going to. So you either have to suck it up or you have to tell them. And he struggles when people don't get up to his standards. But he is full of integrity, and it's never boring. I'll tell you that. It's never boring.
So one last question before I take us out. What are your goals for the next 5 years? Are you wanting to stay at NBC and then see where your career takes you after that, or?
Oh, George.
We'll do the next 5 days if that helps.
So I've got 2 years left on my contract with NBC. I've been there 7 years already, so that'll take me to 9 years. In this game, what I've realised, and I've always only ever signed contracts, so I've never had, I think I was on a staff job for about 3 months at the BBC, then I ended up leaving. Everything has been short term, and that's the industry I work in. It's a bit like football in that way. And so what I've learned is, and I know this sounds like I'm giving you an answer that I would always expect from a footballer or a manager, and I'd be like, oh, really, you're lying. But I genuinely tell you that I think about it. Of course, I think about the future all the time, and Paul and I talk about it a lot. But I suppose it's partly my age. I'm turning 40 in November, but it's partly my age, experience at coming towards end of contracts. I'm not worried about it. I'm a tiny bit more worried because it's COVID and like what on earth is going on.
Yeah.
But generally, I'm not worried about it because the NBC move came out of the blue. The phone rang, and I didn't tell you this, guys. I mean, I was contemplating leaving the industry altogether when I was working towards the end of my ESPN contract. I just really found pitch side reporting in the Premier League very difficult. I found I'd hit a ceiling. I didn't think I was always going to be number 2. I was number 2 to Ray Stubbs. Just felt like I was always going to be number 2 everywhere I went, and I was never going to get a chance. I was 32, and I was just thinking, I think I'm done. I think I'm tired of fighting the fight, and I'm just like 10 years into this. I think maybe I'm going to do something totally different, like come out of it. Very serious about it. Within about 3 weeks of having that conversation with my dad and with my husband, the phone rang, and it was my agent, and he said, and I'd been with him for 10 years, and he said to me, "Are you sitting down?" And I was like, "Yeah."
You could have. Yeah.
NBC have called me, and they're flying me out to New York next week to discuss you being the lead presenter of the Premier League.
Oh.
And I mean, that was another one of those moments I told you about when I won the BBC, where your whole life flips in your brain. A million questions are born, and so that pulled me back off the brink of leaving the industry altogether. And so that's made me trust that stuff happens. And as long as I keep doing my absolute best, and as soon as I finish talking to you, I'm back at the desk for another 6 hours of prep, and then I've got another whole 12 hours of prep probably tomorrow, and before I do the show on Sunday. Do I need to do 20 hours of prep? Probably not. But if I don't do 20 hours of prep and I make a mistake on Sunday, I'll never forgive myself. So as long as I'm doing the right things and working hard and producing good TV, the next chapter will take care of itself. And I just think that there's chapters in all of our lives, and I'm lucky to have had so many chapters that there is another chapter coming. It might still be with NBC. It might be, who knows? I've no idea. But it's just exciting to think that, you know, that I'm lucky enough to hopefully continue working in television and doing something I love. And let's be honest, it's an amazing job. And it's one that if you'd asked me 10 years ago, oh, in 10 years, you're going to be the face of the Premier League in America, I'd absolutely laughed you out of town.
Yeah.
No chance. And so things happen. So I just trust in the universe a little bit. I just trust in the universe, and I'm excited for whatever comes my way. If anything comes my way at all, who knows?
Oh, you've got
That's
a big Sunday ahead.
Yeah.
Big.
Oh my God, you guys. I'm sitting here now, before I came on.
Relegation battle in top 4.
The relegation in top 4. I don't think in 7 years on NBC we've had a better final day, because we've had a couple of title races, but they've really been like not that bad.
Like last year it was kind of.
It was like Man City and
Last one's 2012 with Man City.
Sergio Aguero. And you get them once every 10 to 15 years, and we haven't had another one since. But Wet Sunday is as big as we've had in terms of permutations since we've been on air. And trying to make sure that on air I get across to the viewer the neutral, the Villa fan, the Watford fan, the Bournemouth fan, the Man United fan, the Leicester fan, the Chelsea fan. I've got to get across what they all need. New times throughout the day. We're on air at 9 a.m, come off air at 4. So we're on air for 7 hours. It's a really difficult balance because it's a lot of explaining. So I've got to make sure that today and tomorrow I'm going to bed at night knowing exactly what happens if Watford score in the 80th minute. And that, you know, there's a lot to do, but that's my job and I love it. And I'm so excited because that's when this job is at its best, when it's live, when there's breaking news, when things are changing, when there's tears, when there's joy. I mean, that is just, for me, that is the best of the best.
It's going to be amazing.
It's
going to be amazing.
Well, I wish you the best of luck
for
Sunday.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for spending time with us, coming on the podcast. We hope that we can do this again. Hopefully.
Yes, of course.
Next season, if you're free, maybe partway through the season, that'd be great. Maybe in the break, because obviously we've got a break coming next season, the winter break. But this
no winter break next season. No winter break next season. They took.
Is it not?
Straight in.
Yes, it's going to be September the 12th to May 23rd, and you've got time to breathe.
And then the Euros.
And then we're going to bring it home, and then we're going to.
Mason Greenwood is going to be the new Michael Owen next summer. Mason Greenwood.
Don't. Oh dear.
This has been the Max Talk podcast. Rebecca, once again, thank you very much for spending time with us.
Thank you.
My pleasure, guys.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure. I'm George. That's Max. That's James. Thank you very much. Right, we just finished recording.